Another week, another episode of Pixel Peak. Thanks for tuning in. How are you feeling this week, Bobby?
Pretty good. I think I finally recovered from doing the editorial at the beginning of the month. Our writers also found some pretty interesting stories to report on this week, so I'm ready to go.
You know that you're up for next week's editorial, right?
Already? Maybe our writers will go a little easier on me this time around.
Instead of looking ahead, let's look at what happened this past week. For one, we discovered that EA is building their own esports broadcasting studio, so we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Google's upcoming game streaming service was also a pretty ambitious announcement, and we'll be shining light on the details related to it.
Oh, and Call of Duty Mobile is finally happening. Activision and Tencent are doing a lot of cool stuff for fans for that one, so we gotta cover it.
Speaking of Call of Duty, we have our writer and PlayStation analyst Tanner Mizelle here to talk to us about some pretty big updates to their esports league that we'll be seeing later this year.
After that, we have an editorial from our other writer, Mack Stein, on THQ Nordic's 8chan scandal, which we reported on a few weeks ago.
And to wrap up the show, we have our reviewer Logan Berg here to give us his thoughts on Don't Die, 4 Days in a Wasteland.
Well, Bobby, you said you were ready to roll, so let's go. I'm Kristen Lawrence.
I'm Bobby Eggins, and we hope you enjoy your stay here
on Pixel Peak.
This week, EA announced that it was working on building an esports broadcasting studio at its headquarters in Redwood Shores, California. Called the EA Broadcast Center, the studio will be used to host EA game tournaments and esports-oriented shows. The center will also be home to 2 studio sets, a competitive gaming venue with audience seating, and a rest area for athletes. In a statement to GBiz, GM of EA's competitive gaming division, Todd Citron, said that the studio was intended to signal EA's commitment to competitive gaming for years to come, but that it wasn't necessarily the center of the publisher's esports efforts and events. In the statement, Citron also said EA's vision has always been to make stars of all our players by encouraging competition at every skill level. From a business perspective, this increases deeper engagements in our games as well as attracts new and lapsed players.
During the Unity keynote at the Game Developers Conference, Activision and Tencent announced that they are reintroducing the Call of Duty franchise to phones. Unlike the downscaled Black Ops Zombies port that was sold for $7 almost 7 years ago, the upcoming entry will be fully featured and free to play. Simply titled Call of Duty Mobile, the app will include many of the franchise's online multiplayer modes, and the announcement trailer hinted at a playable zombies mode. Based on what Activision and Tencent showed off, what makes Call of Duty Mobile unique is the fan-favorite selection of maps and game modes. Original game types Search and Destroy and Free-for-All make a return, and Nuketown, Crash, and Hijacked also make an appearance in the trailer. There is more to come too, so both new and long-term fans have plenty to enjoy when the game comes out later this year.
PUBG Mobile is continuing to see attention worldwide since we talked about it last week, but not all of that attention is positive. In Maharashtra, India, several districts are outlawing the game after an accident occurred on Hingoli district train tracks. The accident involved 2 adults, Nagesh Gaur and Swapnil Annapurn, who were both run over by the train while playing the popular Battle Royale. Following the news, rallies broke out criticizing the game for being addicting and negatively affecting Indian youth, which eventually led to the game being outlawed in some areas. That hasn't stopped people from playing the game in public, though. More than 10 people have been arrested this week in the districts where PUBG Mobile is legal to play. You heard that correctly. People caught playing PUBG Mobile in public are being cuffed and taken into custody. India's police officers have shared that the game is engrossing enough to the people playing it that the players didn't even notice officers approaching them. The game has also seen criticism in India before, earlier this year. Exam scores averages were lower than usual, and the Jammu and Kashmir Students Associations expressed that the game should have been banned then. The group described the problem as more concerning than a drug addiction, and although those views are seen as extreme at the time, recent events have brought the issue to India's government officials' minds.
At GDC on Tuesday, Google finally pulled back the curtain on its upcoming game streaming service called Stadia. The service is a cloud-based game streaming platform that will work on everything from desktops to Chromecast. Launching later in 2019, Stadia is powered by Google data centers in more than 200 countries. The service expands upon Google's Project Stream from late last year, which allowed test participants to play Assassin's Creed Odyssey in Chrome browsers. Project Stream maxed out at 1080p, but Google says that Stadia can be streamed in 4K at 60 frames per second. Stadia is aiming for compatibility with all USB controllers and keyboards, but Google is also launching its own controller for the service. The controller is pretty run-of-the-mill, but it features a few buttons that other systems lack. One would allow players to launch YouTube streams of their gameplay, and other is a Google Assistant button that will operate like other Google Home devices. Google has yet to announce pricing details about the service, like whether or not it will require a subscription, but we can look forward to finding out later this year.
As the latest entry in the Devil May Cry franchise sees acclaim from both critics and fans, players have started investigating into the lives of the voice actors, only to dig up some pretty nasty history. Reset-era user Skittles discovered that the voice actor for Morrison, the only person of color within the game, was portrayed by Joey Kamen, a white man who had incriminating videos of himself on his personal YouTube channel. Up until this past week, Kamen's channel included recordings of him donning blackface while mocking Black American culture, Kamen wearing a wig while making transphobic jokes, and several other offensive takes at racial or religious stereotypes. Kamen later issued an apology to Newsweek and followed it with, "Some of my comedy is edgy, and everyone is entitled to their own opinion as to what they think is funny, but please do not refer to me being racist or otherwise. I do not come from a place of hate in any of my work. I removed the videos because I thought it was the right thing to do. Whether or not fans can accept the apology and continue to enjoy his less offensive work, though, is up to them."
For a brief moment this week, it looked like Lucasfilm Games might be releasing a project for the first time since Monkey Island 2. On Wednesday, Disney posted job listings for producers and marketers at the old studio that, according to the descriptions, would oversee the development of games based on Lucasfilm IPs like Star Wars. It seemed like after years of negative fan reception around EA's handling of the Star Wars license, Disney was looking into bringing development back in-house. On Thursday, however, Disney reached out to Gamasutra to clarify that it wasn't doing anything of the sort. Lucasfilm Games isn't being reformed because it never actually stopped existing. Lucasfilm Games, like former publisher LucasArts, is still around and kicking at Disney, but the company doesn't develop anything anymore. Instead, it oversees and manages existing licenses. So what outlets and fans saw as a sign to come was actually further commitment to current deals. Sorry folks, but it doesn't look like EA is losing control of Star Wars just yet.
Welcome to this week's analysis segment. Activision recently announced its new franchise Call of Duty, World League. Here we have writer and PlayStation analyst Tanner Mizelle in to discuss how the league will work and what it means for the future of competitive gaming. Tanner, thanks for being here with us.
Glad to be here.
So first off, for people who aren't familiar, like me, what is the Call of Duty World League?
Call of Duty World League is an esports competition that's been established for 3-ish years now. But Call of Duty's been involved in esports since 2006, and that started with LAN competitions, and that's slowly evolved into what modern esports is today, which is the World League.
The buy-in for the league is $25 million. Will that price be worth it for the owners?
Well, in Overwatch League, the buy-in is $20 million, and in other esports before it, it's been like 10 million around. It's still in the millions. So I think it's just a result of the developing esports industry and people making investments in it. It's just going to cost more and more because people are going to be making more and more out of it as they participate in more esports in the future.
So location-based teams are going to be a first for competitive Call of Duty. Do you think those kinds of teams are going to be able to find any traction?
I absolutely think they will. Overwatch League has been doing it. I know I'm comparing it a lot to that, but Overwatch League is one of the most successful esports events to come out like within the past couple of years, and Call of Duty is just as big, if not much bigger than Overwatch League. So for local teams, at least establishing them, I think it'll work just as seamlessly with like it does with the Overwatch League teams, and it can build fan bases within those local or those specific locations, and I think that just brings more people in to watch esports. So it would definitely be successful if they use location-based teams in Call of Duty World League.
So how do you see this competing with other franchised leagues?
Well, Call of Duty is so big, like it's definitely bigger than Overwatch League, and probably just as big as League of Legends, at least in terms of a fan base. All they need to do really is build on promotion for their esport, and that will bring players of Call of Duty in, and ultimately get more viewers and more viewership from that. And I think that the number of viewers that they could get is very comparable to many popular esports competitions today.
So on a calendar, you have New Year's, you have your birthday, and you have a new Call of Duty game every year. How's that going to look for the league?
Well, for as long as the league has been established, they've changed the game out several times. In 2016, they started with Black Ops 3, moved on to Infinity Warfare, then on to World War II, and now they're on Black Ops 4. I think that as each new game releases, no matter what gimmicks it may have, it's going to be part of the Call of Duty World League, and that'll also help keep things pretty interesting. Like, the game changes every year, so the esports scene and how people play the game will also change every year.
So it's not going to be like Smash, where it's 1v1, Fox, no items, Final Destination, melee only?
No, and with Smash, like, you have new characters that are introduced. This is how Call of Duty is introducing new mechanics in a more interesting way to watch the game, is by making the most recent title the title that they'll be using in Call of Duty World League.
Tanner, thanks so much for talking with us today. And now we'll visit Jean-Luc in this week's editorial.
In Season 2, Episode 5 of Pixel Peak, we talked about how THQ Nordic had done an AMA on 8chan, a message board that was started for people that were banned from 4chan. The week that it happened, the story dominated the headlines for a day or two, and it looked like a massive PR blunder for the publisher. People unfamiliar with 8chan called THQ Nordic out for supporting a site that is a known hangout for racists and white supremacists, as well as a former host to child pornography. PR and marketing manager Philip Brock said in a statement that he hadn't done his due diligence and agreed to the AMA without knowing what it was infamous for. The company posted an apology and tried to move on. For the most part, it worked out fine for them. News cycles champion recency more than anything, so after original reports came out, most media outlets moved on. Then last week, someone used 8chan to plan, announce, and livestream terrorist attacks on 2 mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand. Well, lads, it's time to stop bleep posting and time to make a real-life effort post. By the time you read this, I should be going live. It is a message that the shooter posted on 8chan before beginning a rampage that took the lives of 50 mosque goers and injured another 50. 8chan wasn't the only site involved in the shooting. Both Facebook and Twitter were hosts to the stream. The video was also reposted on YouTube and discussed while it was happening on Reddit, but there's a reason that the shooter announced himself of 8chan. There's a reason it was his base of operations before he launched his attack. 8chan isn't a place that normal web users go to. It's a home for the exiled. It's a safe space for the people who are so toxic that no one else will accept them. The board got its start in 2013, when founder and 4chan user Frederick Brennan became worried about censorship on 4chan and created a spin-off board. From its inception, it was designed to allow intolerant and illegal behavior. 8chan is also widely known as a Gamergate stronghold. After mention of the controversy was banned from 4chan, Gamergaters moved to 8chan to continue their hatred and attacks. Both in and outside of the game industry, its reputation precedes it, and it's unfathomable to think that the people at THQ Nordic were entirely unfamiliar. It's not that Brock hadn't done his due diligence. It's that he or someone around him was too absent-minded or complacent to really think about it. And if it looked bad for them at the time, it looks monumentally worse now. Was it possible for THQ Nordic to know that a terrorist attack was going to be announced on the board 2 weeks after its Q&A session there? No, but the actual violence is the only new part to this. 8chan has long been a site that devoted itself to fighting political correctness and breeding fascism and intolerance. The rhetoric that led to the shooting of 100 Muslims in New Zealand is commonplace in 8chan and places like it. The attack was the next step, but the conditions for it have been present from the very formation of the message board. The end result is another blunder that reflects poorly on the entire industry. Something about this seems incredibly difficult for a lot of game workers to get through their heads. You don't have to be a bigot yourself to perpetuate this behavior. Just acknowledging it without viciously condemning it legitimizes it. THQ Nordic's idiotic presence on 8chan gives credence and relevance to its users and their views. It integrated them into the base that THQ Nordic is catering to. No apology is going to take away from Brock joking with users about Lolly or thanking them for sharing their anti-PC statement. THQ should serve as a cold reminder of their associations one can draw to themselves, as well as those affiliated with them if they aren't careful. The game industry isn't new to these problems, and it has no business feigning ignorance when they come into light. There isn't a person working in games that shouldn't know what 8chan is, and why they should avoid it. Companies and people like in gaming not only need to stay away from places like 8chan, they need to completely disallow and condemn them altogether. Otherwise, these unwanted ties to white supremacy, child pornography, and terrorism will remain tangled into the fabric of gaming culture forever.
Duct tape, check. Large wet sheet, check. What are you doing? Don't distract me. Night's coming any minute. I'm trying to figure out how not to die. Here, come in, take shelter, and check out this review of Don't Die, 4 Days in a Wasteland. Death, enemy, desperation. The apocalypse is upon us and don't escape. 4 Days in a Wasteland, a point-and-click survival game. Developed by Script Builder and published by Armor Games, this is the 4th title in a franchise that began as a series of free Flash games in 2013. As an early fan of Don't Escape, I was exceptionally excited to see its transition to a more ambitious paid indie game, and I was not disappointed. Our story follows David, a man surviving the chaotic conditions of an apocalyptic Earth. Whether toxic gas or scorching heat, each night brings a new danger that requires you to prepare for your very survival. David must rely on his prophetic dreams for guidance and his intelligence to protect himself. Much like its past iterations, Don't Escape 4 revolves around managing your resources, most important of which is time. Every journey and major action takes up time, forcing you to strategize how you approach your day. Adding to this is your limited capacity to hold items. Is that 10-pound bag of charcoal worth slowing you down? Don't Escape constantly made me question my efficiency, and even one day in, I just knew I had to replay the game later to maximize my routes. Even with that stress, the game is a joy to play. There's very minimal hand-holding, and so when you figure out your next step and succeed, it's very satisfying. Your daily actions culminate in a sequence that goes over everything you did to safeguard yourself, giving you a score on your thoroughness. Even though I easily beat the first night, it made me question if I should have saved some items for later nights. Don't Escape definitely has layers and multiple methods to surviving. But what's the point of survival if the world's without character? Along your journey, you meet a number of fellow survivors with whom you can chat with. I enjoyed the stories they had, and the game did a great job at evoking sympathy. It's hard not to be invested in helping out an orphan suffering through the apocalypse, or a broken man trying to find new purpose in the waste. And they're not just blurb generators. NPCs can be a big help in reducing your workload and saving you precious time. Oftentimes, they can also give you insight into things you've missed. An early ravine that slowed me down could actually be repaired, and I would have never noticed if not for me checking over the dialogue. That's not to bash the game's visuals, I was just being blind. The game's pixel art style is one I actually really like. The design doesn't dumb down, but rather abstracts the desolate world we wander. And it certainly doesn't shy away from the gory aspects of an apocalypse either. If there's one thing that kept Don't Escape from reaching the peak for me, it would be the flavor text when examining objects. While I think it's serviceable at worst and witty at best, I would have liked more options in exposition. Take your hideout for example. You could check out a picture and whatnot, but I would have liked a general description of the more mundane but immersive aspects. Things like smell or sound, although the game's soundtrack is also decent. That's nitpicking, but in a game like this, that's really the only negative that stood out to me. Because at the end of the day, Don't Escape 4 Days in a Wasteland is a solid game, truly worthy of being Scriptwelder's first priced game. I encourage you to check out his older games and see for yourself the quality content that this game is a culmination of.
Yep, this ought to keep me safe. Oh, you finished the review? Well then you know Don't Die 4 Days in a Wasteland is a solid game perfect for the survivalist arsenal. Bobby and Kristen, did you survive the night too?
Yeah, we're here, but I think Jean-Luc's still trapped in the editorial section. Kristen, why has there got to be all this drama in this industry? Isn't gaming all about having a good time?
Well, yeah, but if everything was fine, Pixel Peak would probably cease to exist, and we couldn't be host anymore.
Oh, right. It also wouldn't exist without our fantastic crew. Thanks to writer and PlayStation analyst Tanner Mizelle, writer Mack Stein, reviewer Logan Berg, and producers Kyle Presley and Caitlin Holly for putting this show together.
If you liked what you saw, be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Pixel Peak AppTV. You can also find us live through AppTV and YouTube every Saturday at 2 p.m.
Thank you so much for watching, and we hope you enjoyed your stay here on Pixel Peak.